Good evening and welcome into Classic Wax, brought to you by the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell. We're going to take a sip of hot coffee here real quick to get these things started. Been a lovely day in Tucson, Arizona. I don't know what part of the world all of you are in, but it has been very hot here for a very long time. And I woke up this morning, it was cloudy, it was cool. I've had the windows open all day. It's been absolutely amazing just feeling the breeze flow over my head because I haven't had hair for it to flow through in a very long time. But I hope you've all had an excellent day, an excellent start to your week. Really excited for today's show. We are looking at a great record from 1996, Wilco's Being There. Very excited to talk about that record and a few other things. If you're new to the show, just a few notes here to get you familiar with what's going on here. We like to celebrate this day in rock and roll. So October 29th, the big caveat is that we need to pick an album that was released on this day. And there weren't too many albums to pick from. Honestly, there was a handful of like fairly solid ones, but I felt like Wilco Being There was the album to pick today. So it seemed like kind of a no-brainer when I was going through that list. I do want to give a shout out to, real quick, pull up this gentleman's name here, because there's an amazing website that I've been trying to use and get a little more on point with my dates here. But this guy put together a phenomenal catalog of music here. So if you go to Steve Hoffman Music Forums, there's this guy McKigney. It's Mick and then capital Kigney. McKigney has compiled this list that is super useful for me anyways. You know, if you're down to actually like find the actual dates that albums were released, I know that there are certain databases out there, but they don't necessarily catalog them or have the search filters the way that this list does. So I just want to give a shout out to him for putting this together. I mean, he's got like 60 years of music. I think like 35,000 records that he's compiled up there. I'm sure he's gotten help from a lot of people. So kudos to all of those individuals as well for that list. So aside from being released on today's date, we also need to go back at least 20 years. So prior to 2004, that is the other major qualification for choosing the album of the week here. But Wilco's Being There, we're going to get into that down the road a little bit. Love the band. Love their ability to grow outside of AM. I think it's a fantastic record. But I was listening to it earlier. It'd been a minute since I checked out that album, and it's easy to listen to. It's safe. And what I love about Being There is that Jeff Tweedy finding himself in a point in his life where things were different. He, had a child. He was, making albums on a major record label where for a long time he'd just been putting out indie stuff, and there wasn't really necessarily the pressure there to perform, the expectations for the music that he was producing and creating. And so I love that about this record. I love finding yourself in a position in life where you need to step up your game. And I think that Wilco, especially Jeff on that record, delivered. Given the talk about Southern rock, folk rock, kind of this idea of Americana, country, all of these things that kind of get blended in that genre. Going to start things off, unfortunately, on a somber note today. I want to remember one of the greatest guitar players of all time, Mr. Duane Allman. Sadly, on this day in 1971, he passed away in a horrific motorcycle accident. I was reading the details earlier. It'd been a minute since I'd read some of that information and just teared up. It's horrific. I don't really want to share it, go into it, but I want to remember the man for what he brought to the table, for his legendary skill set, and for being one of the, if not arguably, the greatest guitar player of all time. Now, I know when Rolling Stone put out their initial 100 greatest guitarists list, Jimi Hendrix was at the number 1 position. Duane was in the number 2 spot. And I want to start this thing off by talking about how, both Jimmy and Duane, there's nothing really as far as studio recordings that can quantify or justify the arguments for their skill set. I had an English professor, Fred Kiefer, when I was in college. He was my Shakespeare professor. He was studying at Oxford, and he had the chance to see Hendrix a couple of times. And I remember him telling me, I'd go to his office hours, and we wouldn't even talk about Shakespeare. We would just talk about music, and I love that he entertained that. But he would talk about how seeing Jimi Hendrix live on stage was almost like being able to talk to an otherworldly deity, being able to listen to them. Like they're just speaking to you directly. He wasn't necessarily a religious guy. That was something that came up before he prefaced that statement, but he was like, whatever power or powers that may be up there, it was like they were directly speaking through Jimmy when he was on stage. And Dwayne pretty much was the exact same way. At Fillmore East, I think is one of the coolest records of all time, not just because of the quality of music, but you actually get to hear Dwayne in his full potential, in his element, the way that he was meant to sound versus other studio recordings, which are phenomenal. In his short span with the Allman Brothers Band, their self-titled debut, Idlewild South, and then posthumously, they put out Eat a Peach, and he had, worked on a number of recordings at that time during the accident. But Dwayne, just so influential over the years, whether directly, I look at a guy like Jeff Tweedy, and there's no way that he wasn't influenced directly by him. But even if he wasn't, the people that Jeff has been influenced by were influenced by Dwayne. He started playing guitar when he was 14 years old. That's another fun thing about our focus of discussion tonight. There's a lot of pretty much like everybody that we're talking about, not pretty much everyone we're talking about, started off as a prodigy at, in the mid-teenage years, and were just able to have that skill set. They just had that knack, that ability. Dwayne, 14 years old when he started playing, talking about his improvisation, his, starting off with session work. And, some of his big credits include Aretha Franklin, Boss Skaggs, Wilson Pickett, and the song in particular, Hey Jude. Eric Clapton talks about the first time he heard that, and just like, who is that playing lead, especially on the outro there. He's like, I got to know who that guy is. So does work with Derek and the Dominoes, and Eric Clapton reflects very fondly on that time with Dwayne, talking about how he was the musical brother that he just never had. Body of work in such a short, literally a decade we're talking here. Starts off playing live shows early on in 14, 15, 16, but by the time he was 17, 18, he was sought after, coveted musician. People were reaching out to him and wanted him. My other favorite story about him, if you're not familiar with the slide element, it's a big part of what people now coin as Southern rock. I always love Greg Allman's take on that. He's like, rock originated in the South. This whole thing in the mid 60s, and so on, moving over to the UK. He's like, rock and roll started here in America, in the South. Southern rock is like calling it rock, is what he says. And I couldn't agree more. But that signature sound, really just that Americana influence, country, folk, bluegrass, and rock and roll, all of that coming together. And Dwayne with his slide element, and just incredible. And the fact that he never really had any type of training, any type of formal training really at all with regards to this, but he had an elbow injury and was super upset about it. And it was his birthday. And Greg brings over a copy of Taj Mahal's debut record, the self-titled record, and a bottle of the Coricidin, I believe is how you say it. But it's basically, just like an antihistamine. It's like a common kind of like cold medicine, basically. And Dwayne just dumps the bottle out and starts using it as a slide, and calls Greg back, and he's like, man, you got to come over. You got to check this out. And he's playing the slide part to Statesboro Blues. Becomes a staple of their live show. And it's really cool at this point in history now. You can actually get replica bottles that are made to look like it. And they just, Dwayne talked about like, it fit my finger perfect, and it just made the perfect sound when I utilized it. It's such an epic story, and just a big part of his legacy, of his legendary skill set and what he brought to the table, not just to rock and roll, but music across the board. Looking at a name like Aretha Franklin, it's just a really big sample of how far his reach extended, and his influence and how many people wanted to work with him. So I just wanted to remember Dwayne today. It's unfortunate that at 24 the world lost him. We'll never know that potential. We'll never know the growth, the artistry that we all could have witnessed. It's sad to think about. It's sad to think about bass player Barry Oakley too. 13 months later, motorcycle accident as well, literally 3 blocks away from where Dwayne had his accident. And they are buried together in Georgia. And it's it's one of the tragic tales of rock and roll, but his legacy lives on in so many different rock and roll outfits, so many different musicians. And I just wanted to take this moment to remember one of rock and roll's and one of music in general's finest players, one of the best of all time. I want to get into some of the albums this week that we were talking about. Led the week off with Soccer Mommy. Sorry that I brought that review to you guys a little late. This new job I got, it was one of our busiest weekends. Halloween is our anniversary, so there were a lot of shenanigans going on, getting prepared for that leading into the week. It was a ton of fun, though. I really enjoyed myself. But this new record from Soccer Mommy, Evergreen, forgive me, is it's interesting. It is, I think, lyrically her finest work to date. She is an artist that has always been incredibly insightful, incredibly introspective. Her lyrics cover a number of personal topics and in a way that's universal. I love that about her writing. That, she might be talking about something that is specific to her, but she writes in a way that, her themes resonate with her audience across the board. And I think with all of you that are subscribed to the channel, I definitely would recommend checking out this record. Sonically, taking a different turn. She's one that, she's always messed around with a lot of like muddied guitar play. Like the production on her last record, Sometimes Forever, was super fun. I loved the industrial electronic elements to it. Again, you had lots of great guitar play that was at work. But what I dig about this new record, her voice is incredible. And I think on a handful of tracks on that last record, the elegance of that instrument was lost. And so sonically, this might not be her best effort to date. And I've, read a handful of things that argue that and talked to a few people that said, it wasn't necessarily the most exciting effort from her. But I love the maturation as an artist and as an individual. She's 27 now. Life is complicated as you grow older. And, the longer that all of us are around, it's unfortunate, but the more loss we are bound to experience. And so listening to an artist like her, trying to find closure on issues, trying to move forward, and that newfound perspective that she has, I find it so refreshing. I find her take on life and her outlook and just the vivid imagery as well in some of the songs that she's written on this new record, Evergreen, are just astounding. Like I love an artist that can really, again, have that universal quality and still put you in a specific time and place where, they're talking about something so personal, but the details, they still even resonate with you. They might remind you of something personal that you've dealt with in your life. And I think that the strength of this record lies in that quality. Not going to argue that it's her best album overall to date, but I think lyrically she is showing incredible promise in that development, and she just keeps getting better and better, and the vocal harmonies as well. I think the music allows her voice to shine more than it did on Sometimes Forever, and even in her earlier works. It's Clean and Color Theory are records that you get a lot of muddied guitar play as well, and it's cool to see her branch out, take this different path, and I just continue to look forward to any type of music that she puts out. Really enjoyed this new record from Laura Marling as well. She is someone that I haven't had a whole lot of time to dive into her catalog. I shouldn't say that. She's one of those artists that's been in my peripheral. And, recently in the last few days, I haven't had as much time, but I look forward to going back, checking out all of her records. I mean, she is prolific. And, as far as UK performers these days, the Mercury Prize nominations for Alas, I Cannot Swim, her debut in '08, I Speak Because I Can in 2010, Once I Was an Eagle in 2013, and Song for Our Daughter in 2020. This record, Patterns in Repeat, is following up Song for Our Daughter, which is interesting because at the time of writing that, she didn't have a child. She was just writing from a different perspective, a strength that she, really displays across the board in what I've listened to. Give me just a moment. I think someone is at the door knocking, trying to get me to vote or something, but the dog is upset. Give me just a second. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Hufflepuff was a little fired up. Laura Marling, though, this new record, Patterns and Repeat, she's a mother now. She's had a child, and this record, I love the perspective as far as, you know, she's writing about motherhood, writing about this new experience that she's diving head on into, because that's basically what happens when you're a parent. I've never had kids before, but my sisters are both parents. I have a ton of friends that are parents, and you hear the same thing over and over again. There's nothing that you can really do to be prepared for what's coming at you. It's going to be unlike anything else. And so there are certain tracks on this record that focus on that experience, but I think it's the universal idea of life coming at you 100 miles an hour sometimes. And oftentimes you wake up and things happen that you just don't anticipate. You didn't expect that X, Y, and Z would take place when that alarm went off and you got out of bed. And being able to cope with that, finding a way to have the strength and the drive to carry on in the good times and the bad times. I mean, I'm not talking about just, you know, negative happenings in life. You know, sometimes we wake up and the most profound, monumental things can take place and completely change the trajectory of our lives. And I think that she brilliantly captures that on this record. This album is beautiful. I mean, I really love the folk drive to it, the elements of guitar play that are at work on this record as well. The strings are, I would say that, you know, they're gorgeous. There's a couple moments where it maybe seems a little too monotonous. It maybe seems like she's kind of just playing around with the same instrumentation from track to track, but it's okay. This is an album that moves at a pretty fast pace. It's roughly about 35 minutes, so I don't think it's overdone. I think that the amount of music and what she's doing on this particular record, it comes in, you know, just the right amount to satiate your appetite. I thought this record is beautiful, and she's another one that, you know, her voice is stunning, and the music that's been created for this album really is there to, you know, just kind of create that stage for her to stand up on and let her voice be the shining instrument. Absolutely love that about this record, and I look forward to bringing you that review shortly as well. That all ties into with our album of the week, this country, folk, Americana feel that has been such a cornerstone of a band like Wilco. And this album being there it's another one that, you know, I listened to AM this morning, hadn't listened to this record in quite a long time as well. Talking about Jeff Tweedy and, you know, what he was facing at this point in his life. Talks about how he stopped smoking marijuana. There was a dependence on there that, you know, his partner that he had just, I believe they just married a few years before that, but wanting to, you know, have the headspace where he was more involved, more in tune with those relationships, those dynamics, and especially having a child and wanting to be the best father that he could possibly be. But the pressure that was there as well, not just from a personal standpoint, but from a professional standpoint. Coming off of the breakup of Uncle Tupelo, his partner, Jay Farrar. Hufflepuff, come on, buddy. Relax. Hufflepuff, it's okay. Jay Farrar, and having success with Sun Volt's first record, and AM was not well received. Critics didn't really, you know, buy into it that much. It didn't chart at all, actually. And listening to that record and then listening to Being There Today, I like AM. I think it's a solid effort, especially, you know, for a debut record for a band. But Jeff's a guy that a ton of musical experience under his belt up to that point. And the big criticism was, can he branch out? Can he do something bigger, bolder, more profound? And I think both sonically and lyrically, Being There is that effort. Bob Egan featured on the pedal steel. Excuse me there. Need a sip of coffee. I absolutely love the work that he did on this record. It's unfortunate he's really only on a couple of songs, and wasn't really involved thereafter, I think, on too many projects, if any at all. I'd have to go back and look at their catalog and look at personnel. But I love just his influence in the studio there. Jay Bennett, though, this is his first record with Wilco, an incredible multi-instrumentalist. Keyboards, that was the big thing that, Jeff was like, we don't really have a solid keyboard player really at all. So bringing him in, working with Jay, a relationship that unfortunately did become contentious, but I think it's also, what drove them to excel through the 90s and into the 2000s as a band and really put their stamp down in the indie rock arena. And Max Johnston, it's his last record with Wilco, unfortunately. I think marital problems and just feeling like he was being replaced by Jay created complications. And it's unfortunate because I think he's really talented dude as well. But this is, I feel like this is the album that really marked Wilco's potential as a band, that really demonstrated that, yes, Jeff as a songwriter especially is the type of guy that can mature as a lyricist and can mature as a songwriter, branch out of, making music that's safe and easy listening and easy to listen to, be brave, be bold, be daring. What I love about this record is that there's not necessarily a whole lot that is radio friendly. And I love the comparison to Exile on Main Street. I definitely feel that, there's a lot musically to compare to that Stones album. Exile on Main Street is one of the greatest records of all time. So I think, it's kind of like a big comparison and kind of a big leap. But just, there's not really a whole lot that you hear from that record. I mean, I guess now in retrospect, if you throw on a classic rock station, you might hear a couple of songs from that record, but there isn't anything off of that double album that, sits as like a radio friendly song, like one of the quote unquote hits that the Rolling Stones had. And that's what I love about that record. I mean, sonically, it's probably the best thing that they ever put out. It's an incredible record. And I'd argue that about Being There. This is a record that, throw radio friendly out the door, even though there might be a few tracks that could survive on modern day radio now. But it's a phenomenal collection of songs. I want to dismiss the talk of it being just a marketing scheme and a gimmick as far as the double LP. I think it's really cool that Jeff approached the record company and was like, listen, like we have 19 songs here. I think they wrote about 30 for the record. But we have 19 songs. We want to put this out and we don't want to charge for a double album. And what I think is cool about that is that the medium, the CD, it holds 80 minutes of music. I'm a big fan of Tool. I look at albums like Lateralis and Anima, and I mean, basically everything that they've done, right? 10,000 Days, it's one CD. It holds 80 minutes of music. And I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a double record given the time that it was put out and the popular medium that was there. So I love that in 1996, taking it back to the mid-90s, I forgot to mention that we were going back to 1996 when we brought this up. The CD being the big medium is, that's the new wax. That was what people were using as far as the mindset of how can we push this? How can we, maximize the potential of this new medium? And so that's what I would argue Wilco was doing with this record and really setting a standard for that, until we came across streaming platforms and that change came about. But I think this record, I want to get into the track list here because it's a big one. Misunderstood, such a cool song. You got a big old opener that really demonstrates what's going on this record. Yeah, we're going to tap into that country flair, that alternative kind of like rock-driven country element, but we're going to do more. We're going to get experimental. We're going to branch out and hopefully blow your head off. I'm a fan of this record, and I believe that they did. You get this slow build, these ominous drums, this guitar. I love the way the feedback just gives way to this light acoustic piano. It's almost like the vocal element is on a little bit of reverb as well. Got a simple organ texture that builds in. Big role in the drums and guitar from the intro. I love the way that moves back in a little bit, forming this bridge. But about 4:30, this thing, it just takes off and goes to complete chaos. Like, I love the big rock and roll flair, the psychedelic production. It is such a fun way to open this album up, and I think in a way shut down the haters that were maybe, going into this record thinking that Wilco and Jeff Tweedy as a songwriter had nothing more to offer. Totally the opposite. Pull this up here. Should have Had this queued up a little better. Forgive me, guys. And there we go. So Far, Far Away, you got this folky acoustic rhythm and harmonica to open. I love the sparse drifting piano, the pedal steel. Jeff is a guy, his vocal element, a lot of his music as well. In this particular song, I get Neil Young. It just pours like into my headphones, into my ears from this song, and I love that influence. I think it's super prominent and a good one to play around with. In this particular song, I like that it gives you that familiarity, that territory that you kind of expected Jeff to work with. But also it is unique and it is a solid song. Great way to come off the chaos of Misunderstood, in my opinion. Monday, your third track, get this driving percussion and just rocking guitars. I love the up-tempo nature of this track. Hard rock and blues foundation here. And this is a track where really feeling that Rolling Stones Exile on Main Street feel, especially when some of the horns come in. It just adds such a vibrant life to this track. Really dig that element. And lyrically, that little CCR shout out at the end is pretty cool as well. Outtake, Out of Sight, Out of Mind is your fourth track. It's going to carry that driving rock and roll momentum. Got a light grunge element to it as well. And it makes sense when you think about 1996 and where music was headed. I mean, you pretty much have the death of grunge at that point, but I feel like alternative rock found itself in a state of limbo. It's like, what's the next move? Like what is going to be the next big commercial drive, so to speak? And it's almost kind of cool to see them give a little bit of a homage to the past with the sound of this track. I don't know if that's necessarily what they were trying to do, but I feel that when I listen to this particular song. I like the way that the simple riff works in splendidly. You get that guitar play that comes exceptional as the song progresses. And this is a song where, the piano just hits at the end brilliantly, and that's all on Jay. I absolutely love that about it. Forget the Flowers is your fifth song. Acoustic rhythm and electric lead gets us back to that country feel. Just a great shift in momentum, and as far as just the the genre feel of this record, you got this driving rhythm and the banjo element is exceptional as well. And I love when that starts to just play off of the electric lead guitar, and just a really fun dynamic that's at play there on that track. Red Eyed and Blue is your sixth song. Got this mellow acoustic and almost this hollow sounding piano that's brilliantly done. Slightly creepy with the melody and the bright vocal harmonies that are at play there. It sounds like it's like coming from an attic with the production. It's really just got a cool sound. The tambourine and the whistles brighten up the track a little bit. But again, this song, I can't help but feel like it has just a very eerie, spooky feel. And it's really unique in that right. I Got You at the End of the Century is your seventh track. Electric riff, psychedelic electronics at play on this thing. I love that about this song. They're going to open up another up-tempo rocker. You get this choir-like vocal, and there's a lot of vocal harmonies that are at play on this record that I find exceptional as well. On this particular track, I think it's really working nicely. You get hand claps that kind of are driving the percussion a little bit on this thing, and melodies that they just make you feel good. It just has that feel-good quality, which is nice coming off of the spookiness of Red Eyed and Blue. What's the World Got in Store is your eighth track. Banjo and vocal create this intimate, minimal track. Love the acoustic rhythm and the piano that usher in the rhythm section as this track progresses. A minute in, you get this great balance of rock and roll and alternative country, and the organ element, I think, is really nice as well on this song. Hotel Arizona, your ninth track. Love this song. I've stayed in a couple of those in my lifetime, being in here the majority of my life. Organ and electric guitar open. You get this alternative country number, but I dig the prominence of the bass riff on this particular song. I really just love the roll. This particular song, the rhythm drops in at a really nice point. And a highlight for me, the organ, the electric guitar, and that play that's at work there, especially towards the end of the composition, is really exceptional. Say You Miss Me is your 10th track. You get this gentle country number, electric guitar, piano, bit of that pedal steel that's at work here. It has this stop and go progression that, I feel like this song conveys this sense of hopeful longing. I feel like there's two sides to that. There's longing for something and knowing that it's never going to be there. But I feel like the mood of this song, the sonic nature of it, there's this sense of longing, but this hope that you're not doing it in vain. And I really think that this is one of those songs that, as far as Jeff and the strength of his songwriting, really conveys that well. Sunken Treasure is your 11th song, Outlaw Country Twang. I really like the feel of this particular track. The energy of it's nice. Acoustic guitar, the rhythm hits exquisitely. Piano trickles in as well. And I like the way that it's playing with the organ in this song. It works into heavy moments, almost in like a sinister way, towards the middle of the song, and then it backs off. And I love the lyrics at the end of this song. I want to pull them up real quick because, you're talking about Jeff, his growth as a songwriter, and the personal nature, everything that he's gone through too. I mean, if you're a fan of this band, you know about his struggles. And unfortunately, after this record, they continued. But at the time, I love that he says, "Music is my savior. Well, I was maimed by rock and roll. I was maimed by rock and roll. I was tamed by rock and roll. I got my name from rock and roll." It's a really cool way to close out that song, and really a solid way of highlighting his perspective at that time. I feel that early on in his life, being involved in the punk outfits that he was, being involved with the indie scene, not necessarily feeling the obligations, that feeling that, hey, like, I'm just, here to gig, play 5-6 nights a week, make my 50, 60, 70 bucks, live in a cheap place, maybe with a couple of roommates, vibe with them, write music with them. And I think that this particular moment on the record really signals the gravity of what he's feeling at that point in his life. Super well done. Someday Soon is your 12th track. I love the upbeat country nature of this song. You got this acoustic rhythm, great banjo element, pedal steel that's there, organ. And this is a song that I really feel like the gospel flair is prominent on this one. Really nice component of this composition. Out of Mind, Out of Sight is your 13th track. Acoustic guitar and piano match up to build this bright, pretty poppy track. I think that this is definitely like the most pop-oriented song on the record, but that's not to say that it's bad. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of that track Sunshine Day. I like melodically, my head went there. Call me out for it if I'm wrong, but I couldn't help but feel the melody and just the upbeat nature of that track. I love the vibe and the harmonies. They complement the track nicely, and it's just going to maintain that tempo that it starts with to the finish. Someone Else's Song is your 14th track. Somber acoustic riff with a folk influence. I love the accordion on this track. You guys know that's one of my favorite instruments. I love how much it's being used in popular music, but especially, the time and place on this record makes me think of a band, Counting Crows. Super huge in the 90s. Love what they were doing, August and Everything After, Recovering the Satellites. And the accordion, it's just got this subdued production that just makes it sound perfect on this track. And then you get this mandolin element with this Neapolitan flair. This is a song that's really unique when you consider a big track list, and I think it stands out for that reason. Kingpin is your 15th track, mid-tempo acoustic riff. But it's got this kind of shuffle feel to it. The lyrics and the riff duel for center stage. I like the back and forth, the way that, he sings and then the riff comes to prominence, and there's this great back and forth. Drums roll in. They bring in this funky rockin' track. I love all the world percussion that's at play on this song. The pedal steel for the country flair. This song is it's mean. It's got everything that you want from a good Wilco song, and especially looking back on their catalog now, everything that they've done. This is a song that I really feel like anybody that heard it for the first time just signaled all the good things to come. And I love the roll and the bass on this particular track, and it's just got a big rockin' coda that is just amazing. Was I in Your Dreams is your 16th track. Sorrowful, honky-tonk feel in the piano. You got this duel with the pedal steel that's at work on this song. Definitely a nice number and a great highlight for me as far as the dynamic between those two instruments. Why Would You Want to Live is your 17th track. Driving piano and rhythm. You get this muted production in the acoustic guitar. Kind of takes a back seat, but it's kind of like the accordion on Kingpin. It's on Someone Else's Song. It's I like the production. I love the nuanced idea of, you know, knowing when an instrument can just have that supporting role and take a back seat. But the rhythm guitar floats in the background. The hook finds a different tempo and tone. I love that shift in the tempo of the song. You get this great banjo element and this fiddle element that comes into play that is just a highlight for me. The Lonely One is your penultimate track. Gentle acoustic guitar. The ambient strings that carry this weight of sadness really are very powerful. I love that about this song. Bits of pedal steel, organ, and fiddle that work their way in and out. Just a lot of fun instrumental play on that penultimate track. And then Dreamer in My Dreams is your final track. And I love that you just get two bookends, two big old numbers to open and to close. You got this bluesy rocker though. I like the percussion is like breakbeat percussion on this track. It's really cool. The fiddle is fire on this thing. This is a song that the energy I feel, it reminds me of what happened with Bob Dylan in the studio during the Highway 61 sessions. But the chaotic breakdown around 4 minutes is super fun. It returns to this groove, and then the breakdown to finish the song just mellows out with this prominent fiddle feel. It is a beautiful way to close out an incredible record. You know, give me 19 songs. It was the beautiful thing about CDs in the 90s. It's far from my favorite medium now. I will take records first, as you obviously all know. Someone was talking about cassettes the other day on the channel. There was a comment on one of my reviews that, like, I think the cassette is a phenomenal medium, especially, you know, when you're looking to just play something from start to finish. You don't need to skip tracks. There's no need for it. You know, the cassette tape is not the most convenient thing if you want to pop around, but good riddance to that. If I'm buying something, it's because I want to listen to every single song. Streaming platforms are great. 8-tracks are great. I think CDs, aside from the fact that, you know, they do have a pretty big amount of space, you know, you're still getting compressed sounding music. And as far as the streaming platforms are concerned today, I mean, you can throw out 6, 7, a million hours of music for an album if you want to do that. So aside from being very fragile and only containing 80 minutes, I think the CD, totally obsolete. But at this time, I'm really glad to see Wilco take advantage of the medium and make one of their best records. Honestly, Being There is a top tier album in their catalog. It's an exceptional record as far as the signaling, the change that you see, the potential that you see in this band. Again, I will say that AM, a good record, but it's just good. And, you know, if I was a critic coming off of that, you know, 1995 experience, I don't think I would have had the most optimistic outlook. And I think that listening to Being There in its entirety for the first time is something that, I I remember it's been a long time, but the first time I listened to it, it blew me away. And it still blows me away to this day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this record this week. Stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. And tune in next week to Classic Wax. I'll try to always announce that new record probably about 5 or 6 hours before the show begins. Kind of keep you on the edge of your toes, make it a bit of a surprise. But, you know, give you some information to prepare. I like to listen to a lot of stuff. I know a lot of you do as well, but maybe an album comes up that you're not necessarily crazy about and you can take a pass. I'm never going to take that personal. But until then, we will see you next time. Have a good week.